Lisa Hьювел. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. And I thank my Russian and American colleagues who have helped to make it possible. As you think about how much the world has changed, I'd like to ask you a question. What is the importance of the internet? I could make a comparison, and I will, to the 1600s in New England. At that time, colonists needed desperately to communicate from one settlement to another across miles of wilderness and danger. And to do so, they relied on native runners who knew the territory so well as their homeland. We have an equivalent today in the internet as a symbolic messenger. It has become a lifeline, and it's hard to imagine life without it, particularly now. I'm going to be talking about museums here. And to give you a little context, let's think about how museums have evolved. From the 19th to the 20th centuries, they became major transmitters of history and culture. They have continued to be important as trusted societal institutions. And for a long time, until the last part of the 20th century, they enjoyed major visitation from families especially because of the importance of history and social studies in school curriculum. That is one thing that has changed, and it is a challenge to museums that are facing changes in how families take vacations, changes in the economy, and again, a decrease in the significance of history and social studies in American schools today. They've coped with special events, they've coped with special programming, and they've adjusted their ticket prices. And now we have, on top of that, at the beginning of 2020, COVID-19. The American Association of Museums conducted a national survey of 760 museum leaders, and they found, you'll see here, that educational resources continued to be an important service that museums could provide. At the same time, these leaders were asked, what is the risk for you in what has happened with COVID-19? And you'll see that a third of them thought that there was a possibility that they might have to close in the next 16 months. So let's hope that's not the case. I'm going to be talking about 4 museums that have found ways to adjust and adapt. The American Independence Museum, the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and Plymouth Patuxent Museum. All of these museums are located along the east coast of the United States, and they are finding solutions to the questions of what do we do when we can't stay open? How do we reopen? How do we protect staff as well as guests? And we're going to start with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, which is located in Williamsburg, Virginia. Williamsburg was the capital of Great Britain's largest and wealthiest colony, Virginia, and it became the capital of the Commonwealth of Virginia after the Revolution. In 1926, it was established as a foundation, a not-for-profit foundation, the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And this now comprises a town-sized museum, the world's largest living history museum. 301 acres, many buildings, gardens, trade shops, and museums, including 88 original buildings. These are some of the sites that you would see if you're there, and they are also very much like the images and resources that you can find online on the museum's website. You also would be introduced to the interpreters who are so much a part of this museum and the other 3 that I am speaking about today. These, for example, are the nation builders who not only participate in programming on site, but also in the online educational programming that the museum produces.
Самое-то позорное,
So as we look at our website,
ты меня разбудил, я
you can
потом
take
уснуть
note
не могла.
that the impact of digital
Я долго
engagement
лежала.
has become very
В
important
итоге
for Colonial Williamsburg. They have had 2.4 million visits to their website in 2019. They sold over some 430,000 general admission tickets last year. And they have had a following of 730,000 in their social media, comprising Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. In addition, they have the Teacher Institute, which is now over 30 years old. This is Colonial Williamsburg's nationally known professional teacher development. And they, in addition to being a national site for history and citizenship, are also known for this institute, which is now over 30 years old. By the end of 2019, they had educated over 10,360 teachers in the institute, which normally has 20 sessions every summer. By August 2020, even without having had the institute this summer, they have had a total of 24,361 teachers participating in their online, on-site, and off-site programming. Before the disruption that was posed by COVID-19, summer 2020 would have been the 31st year of the Institute. But the educators at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation pivoted quickly to assist the foundation and started providing public programming, like you see here. They have continued to evolve this programming, are doing virtual learning this year, and they're already beginning to develop the Summer Institute for 2021, which will be a combination of virtual learning and restricted on-site participation. We can say that they're very successful in how they're coping with this situation. Another museum that is doing much the same is the American Independence Museum, located in Exeter, New Hampshire. You'll see it here. And it was established as the youngest of the four that I'm speaking of today in 1991 through the efforts of the town of Exeter, the state of New Hampshire, and the Society for the Cincinnati, which is America's oldest patriotic organization. Before COVID-19, AIM concentrated its programming in events, in its exhibits, and also in community activities. At the same time, they were working to redesign and develop their on-site presence. And they did so, developing a strong learning management system that is integrating their images, their resources, and their collections for both on-site and online visitors. The museum is comprised of two buildings, and they are the Ladd Gilman House, which is over 300 years old, and then also the Folsom Tavern and Grounds, where George Washington once ate. Now, the museum has continued to develop its virtual learning. You can see that among the activities and resources they developed a virtual summer camp and virtual programming this past summer. And they're continuing to work on their in-person programming for schools and for classrooms. A very young museum in some respects, but very able and adaptive in this situation. The next museum that I want to speak of is actually two museums, the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, and that is comprised of Jamestown Settlement and the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown. It's called Army for short. Jamestown Settlement was originally established as the Jamestown Festival Park, and that was for the 250th anniversary of the landing of the Jamestown colonists at Jamestown. It was such a popular attraction that the state took it over and it became part of their state-supported museum system as Jamestown Settlement. Jamestown's sister museum was the Yorktown Victory Center, founded in 1976 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the War for Independence and its successful conclusion. In 2017, this expanded as an education complex and was renamed the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown, or Army. For more than 30 years, the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation has been a strong partner in education. It has served teachers with on-site educational visits to Jamestown Settlement and what is now the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown, and also through its classroom outreach programs. As many districts began the 2021 school year with virtual and hybrid learning, JYF is extending its commitment to educators across Virginia and the nation by offering new virtual learning experiences. These programs are designed to deliver the same inquiry-based, interactive programming that teachers have come to expect, with adjustments for virtual delivery both to classrooms and individual students learning at home. In 2020, live learning sessions were customized for grade-level virtual museum tours and hybrid sessions that combined synchronous and asynchronous learning. This past summer, staff conducted virtual summer camps and in-person teacher professional development institutes. Finally, let's explore Plymouth-Patuxent, which was founded in 1947. This museum is located in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and it has two major stories to tell of two cultures: the 1622 Plymouth colony and how it evolved in its interactions with the native people, the Wampanoag, who were located in and around Plymouth, which they knew as Patuxent, their homeland, and also the other native communities beyond. The Mayflower, too, is a replica of the original ship that brought the Pilgrims over to what is now Plymouth, the town of Plymouth. And at the same time, the indigenous Wampanoag people have continued to be involved in telling their story of their history and culture. They interpret part of the outdoor area at Plymouth-Patuxent, and they are very, very much involved in all aspects of the museum interpretation and programming. When COVID-19 occurred, it made many changes necessary for Plymouth-Patuxent. What happened was that this was to be and is the 400th anniversary year of the landing of the original Pilgrims at Plymouth, what they named Plymouth. There were many events planned, there was programming planned on site, and in addition to this, there was a national institute, a national endowment for the Humanities Institute that was to be conducted for 25 teachers from nationwide on site. Well, that wasn't going to happen, unfortunately, in the same way. But again, it's another example of how educators have become very adaptive at these museums. What happened was, and you can see a familiar face there, what happened was that they adapted and adjusted, moving all of the content online and developing new content as well. I was involved as the co-director of the Institute, and I can attest to the fact that they were able to develop impressive and innovative new programming, including Google expedition tours of the 17th century historic Massachusetts sites that teachers weren't able to see in person, but were able to experience because of the depth and the detail and the richness of these virtual tours. In this Institute's 11 days, its learning community spent 80 hours in Zoom sessions for lectures, demonstrations, and discussions. There was a high degree of interaction and engagement that took place. Having worked with all of these museums on a professional basis and conducted active research, I would like to share the following observations with you. What you see here are 4 different museums of early American history that were all impacted significantly by the novel coronavirus in terms of loss of visitation, loss of ticket and gift shop revenue, and changes that had to be made almost immediately to their on-site education programming. In addition, they have responded to the other challenges that I mentioned earlier. On the positive side, there has been a major increase in attention on global history and on global perspectives of American history from educators. They want increasing civic engagement for their students, which these museums and many others can provide. And they want to emphasize students' understanding and use of historical thinking. These changes are occurring and amid the mushrooming of mobile learning devices in 21st century classrooms and the educational demands that have been brought on by the pandemic. Based on their resources and previous experience, each museum has made distinctive choices in how to proceed, taking into account its unique mission and its audiences. As we all know, this has been a very steep learning curve, and there has been a sense of urgency in adapting to new circumstances. All of these museums have been able to develop innovative short-term and long-term changes that will benefit them in the future. I hope that all of you will check out the museum's websites. They all contributed to this presentation and they welcome your interest. Museums bridge national and cultural boundaries, and I have enjoyed the opportunity to share 4 of them with you. My contact information is located here, and I also welcome any questions that you might think of later that you would like to ask me. Please do. But for now, I also want to finally recognize the specific organizations and individuals who contributed images and information. And lastly, if you have any questions, I'd love to be able to answer them for you now. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. And I'm going to stop so that we can get started with the next section.
Hello, Liza, and
Hello.
welcome. Hello, and welcome to the conference. Many thanks
Thank
for
you.
your talk. We have one question so far. Could you please tell a bit more about teachers and their collaboration with these online programs provided by Williamsburg Colonial Museum? So how do they find programs? How the internal process is organized? Some details if possible.
Certainly. With regard to the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, they have actually been in the process of developing technical connections to the education community since the 1950s. They started out with television broadcasting and then proceeded from there to move into a national television broadcasting instead of just using in the classroom projection slides and things like that. What they have gone to now is an entire suite of digital learning possibilities. The reason this is so important is because Colonial Williamsburg has been known for decades for its Teacher Institute, which I referred to in the slide presentation. It's created a teacher community, a network of teachers at all grade levels across the United States who refer back to Colonial Williamsburg after having come during the summers to study there. And they know that it is a verified and very credible source of information on early American history and Virginia history. So through the education department, the outreach that is done and also the on-site education that is done with school groups, they've been able to amass a considerable set of connections for teachers. Teachers could access this through the website, and it's also available globally to anyone who would like to take part.
Okay, now I'm going to translate that. I'm going to translate that to my colleagues. Взаимодействие с учителями началось еще в 1950-х годах с помощью телевидения. Как я поняла, часть программ, она транслировалась на телевидении, то есть телевизор использовался как средство донесения этого обучающего контента. И с тех пор, за десятилетия, наработано уже очень много связей с учителями, целое сообщество учителей, которые знают, что в этом музее можно получить помощь, да, и информацию, знания о городе, о штате в целом, об американской истории. И вот эта вот связь, она постоянно поддерживается образовательным отделом музея. Вот эти вот связи, нетворкинг и доступ к контенту. Он свободный и для учителей из Америки, и для других стран. We have two more questions. Is that true that COVID pandemic lead to globalization of American education content?
That is a very good question. And I guess the answer from right now is we don't know. Museums in the United States have begun to reopen. Colonial Williamsburg, for example, opened back up in June. The other museums as well that I studied have opened up. But across the United States, as the COVID virus continues to increase in cases, museums are facing restrictions again that may cause them to close. So we don't know to what extent this is going to impact a number of museums that may not be able to go beyond this year, for example. A lot of museums, do you want me to stop there for a sec?
No.
Okay, all right. The smaller museums are going to have more of a challenge. The larger museums, as they can develop and increase their resources, their technical resources, will be able to continue to reach out. As I said in the slides, that there's a very steep learning curve for museums here, and many of them have had to accelerate the way that they use digital online programming, and they're doing that.
Пока сложно сказать, потому что музеи были закрыты, теперь потихоньку снова открываются, и особенно у маленьких музеев это по-прежнему вызов работать, да, с публикой с помощью цифровых технологий и как-то этот контент доносить для широкой аудитории. Поэтому пока скорее наблюдаем, и ответы на этот вопрос дать сейчас нельзя. And another question, just to make sure, these online programs, are they free to use for teachers, or they need to pay for them?
It depends. A lot of the programs are available directly through the websites, and you can access them. There are learning resources that are available directly. For individual classes, very often teachers will set up what we could think of as appointments to be able to access and work with these educators on a one-to-one basis with their classes.
Ну, есть разные варианты, и сам контент на сайте, да, обычно это Learning Resources, раздел на сайте, это будет бесплатно, но могут быть варианты, и, видимо, что-то может быть платным, если мы говорим об индивидуальном занятии, когда специалист, музейный педагог будет работать непосредственно с конкретным классом. Тогда уже назначается дата, время, и, видимо, тогда могут уже быть варианты с оплатой. Коллеги, если есть еще вопросы, то, пожалуйста, не стесняйтесь их задать, я помогу с переводом. So far, no more questions.
Could
Oh,
I
no.
add one more thing then, Anna?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Getting back to the question about globalization, I would certainly hope that as we get to the next level of use, that will happen. Once this settles in, I think a lot of educators are saying here in the United States for sure, there's no going back to the way that it was. The acceleration of using online technology has made so many changes in the education system here, whether you're speaking of on ground in classrooms or online. I think the next step is going to be, once that is solidified, once we're through this crisis and people have an opportunity to reflect and to see what is worth carrying forward, my hope would be that we expand out. And my hope would be for more connections like this one today.
Лиза выразила надежду, что кризис, он когда-то закончится и даст возможность, и в том числе с помощью цифровых технологий, в целом, да, учителям, сообществам из других стран больше узнать о предмете, об американской истории. И в том числе благодаря технологиям и вот таким встречам, как сегодня, станет возможным эта глобализация и обмен идеями. Ну, в таком, как я поняла, позитивном ключе. Ну что, so thank you very much for joining us online and spending the morning with us.
Thank you.
Yes, if we have